Here's a scale-up that had everything going for it: a signed strategy guide, a resource team with 30 members, including the state's commissioner for health, a 5-day workshop that brought government, civil society, and implementing partners into one room to build it together. On paper, consensus. And 2 years later, that same resource team was struggling with the most basic questions. Whose job is this now? Who owns it once the project ends? Who's still paying for it in 5 years? The workshop hadn't failed. It had answered some of the right questions and quietly left others unasked. That gap between what was agreed and what was actually understood is what Recommendation 3 is built to close. Recommendation 3 of BWEIM says this: reach consensus on expectations for scale-up. Not consensus that the idea is good. Consensus on what everyone in the room actually expects to happen if it works. Where will these scale to? Which facilities? Which states? How far? What level of the health system will deliver it? Who is it actually for? And how fast is this expected to move? Different stakeholders in the same meeting can walk away with completely different pictures of all four, and nobody notices because everyone nodded at the same slide. Here's why this happens by default, not by accident. A donor may be picturing national rollout in 3 years. A state government may be picturing their own state at their own pace, indefinitely. An implementing partner may be picturing exactly as far as their current grant runs, and not one health facility further. Nobody said any of this out loud, because nobody asked. The meeting ended. Everyone signed the same document, and 3 different expectations walked out of the room wearing the same signature. This is not a hypothetical risk. It is the default outcome, unless someone deliberately surfaces it. Genuine consensus, the kind Recommendation 3 asks for, covers 4 things explicitly, in writing, agreed by name. Geographic reach, which facilities, which local government areas, which states, and in what order. Service delivery level, primary care, secondary, both. Target population, exactly who this is meant to serve and who it isn't. And pace, a realistic timeline for each stage, not an aspirational one. None of this is exciting to write down. All of it is the difference between a shared plan and 3 people quietly running 3 different plans under one name. And here's the part people get wrong, even when they do write it down. Consensus is not a document you finish. It is a position you have to revisit. The guide is explicit about this. Expectations should be modified as learning emerges and as the policy, funding, or health system environment changes. A 5-year-old agreement that nobody has reopened is not consensus anymore. It is a fossil of consensus, and treating it as current is exactly how a resource team ends up confidently disagreeing about something everyone thought was settled. Let me show you what real consensus building looked like and what it missed. In February 2017, Pathfinder and ExpandNet convened a 5-day workshop in Cross River State to build a scale-up strategy for task-shifting long-acting contraceptive implants to community health extension workers. The room had the government of Nigeria, the State Ministry of Health, civil society organizations, and implementing partners, everyone whose expectations actually mattered. Through small group work, breakout sessions, and full plenary discussion, they harmonized their different starting positions into one consolidated guide. At the end of it, a resource team was inaugurated. 30 members, 10 of them staying actively involved, chaired by a civil society advocate, Honorable Ibor. with the State Family Planning Coordinator, Mrs. Lucy, as Vice Chair. On the questions the workshop had explicitly nailed down, geography, cadre, target population, it worked. Within 2 years, 152 CHUs were trained across 76 facilities in 18 local government areas, and the state had created an actual family planning budget line. Grace Effiong, a senior community health extension worker trained under the program, put it simply. In the 2 weeks since her training, she had already inserted 6 implants herself, something she couldn't have done before. That is what happens when expectations about scope and delivery are genuinely shared. But the same resource team's own later reporting is honest about what the workshop didn't fully settle. Not the geography, not the cadre. The other kind of expectation: who owns this permanently, and for how long does support continue once the project that funded the workshop closes out? The team itself documented the gaps. Unclear roles and responsibilities as time went on, difficulty securing government ownership of the plan, and real uncertainty about whether the resource team itself would survive past the life of the project that created it. None of that is a failure of the workshop. It's evidence that geography and delivery level got explicit consensus, while ownership and duration didn't get the same treatment and drifted. Now the objection I hear: we had the workshop, everyone signed the guide. That is consensus. And that's exactly where this goes wrong. A signed document proves that a room agreed on one particular day. It doesn't prove that who owns this in year 5 was ever actually discussed, and it doesn't survive the room forgetting, staff turning over, or funding priorities shifting 2 years later, unless someone deliberately keeps reopening it. Consensus on what to build is not the same as consensus on who's still responsible for it once you're gone. Both have to be explicit. Only one usually gets the attention. So recommendation 3 is not a workshop you run once and file away. It's a standing discipline. Name what everyone actually expects. In writing, across geography, delivery level, population, and pace. And just as importantly, across ownership and duration, and then revisit it as things change, deliberately, not by accident. In the next episode, we move to recommendation 4, tailoring the innovation to the social and institutional setting it actually has to survive in. If this was useful, subscribe for the series. And tell me in the comments, has your team ever discovered, years in, that 2 people who both said yes to the same plan were picturing 2 different plans?